Inference-time reasoning, thinking step by step, may be one of the most transformative capabilities in modern large language models. But what happens when we ask these models to think about deeply ingrained social associations? Does reasoning reduce bias or amplify it? Recent research reveals a surprising truth. Enabling reasoning doesn't just improve problem solving, it can selectively reduce implicit social bias in some models, by as much as 91% in certain cases. This isn't about overtly harmful statements. It's about subtle automatic associations, those embedded in language, shaped by decades of cultural patterns. These are the biases that survive even after alignment training, lurking beneath the surface in tasks designed to measure what psychologists call implicit bias. To understand this, we have to go back to the roots of how bias is measured in humans, the Implicit Association Test, or IAT. In the IAT, people are asked to quickly categorize words, like flower or insect, paired with positive or negative concepts. Reaction times reveal unconscious associations. If you respond faster when flower is paired with pleasant, that suggests a stronger mental link between those concepts. Now here's the twist. This same test can be adapted for AI. Researchers have created a prompt-based version, the LLM Word Association Test, that measures how likely a model is to associate words like career with male names or family with female names. And the results? Models show strong, consistent biases across race, gender, religion, and health, despite being trained to avoid explicit harm. But what happens when we ask the model to think out loud? That's exactly what this study investigated. The researchers tested 4 leading models, GPT-4 Claude Opus 4.1, Gemini 2.5 Flash, and Llama 3.370b, in 2 conditions: standard inference, no reasoning, and reasoning-enabled inference, where the model is prompted to think step by step. And the effect? Profoundly different across models. For GPT and Claude, enabling reasoning dramatically reduced implicit bias scores. In the gender-career stereotype, for example, the bias dropped from over 0.99 to under 0.25, nearly a 75% reduction. In the race-guilt stereotype, the drop was even more striking, from near maximal bias to nearly neutral. But not all models reacted the same. Gemini and Llama showed no significant change. Their bias scores remained high even when reasoning was activated. So why the difference? The key insight lies in what reasoning actually does. In humans, when we're asked to explicitly explain our thought process, we often disrupt automatic, intuitive judgments. That's why people are worse at implicit statistical learning tasks, like spotting hidden patterns in letter sequences, when they're forced to verbalize their reasoning. LLMs behave similarly. When reasoning is enabled, performance on non-social implicit association tasks, like those involving semantic prosody, doesn't improve. Words like cause or restore still carry their automatic valence associations, even when the model is told to think through each step. But here's the critical distinction. The reduction in bias only appears in social domains. Why? Because social bias isn't just statistical, it's normative. These models were trained and fine-tuned not just on language, but on values. Safety alignment, value-laden datasets, and ethical guardrails were baked into the training process. When reasoning is enabled, the model doesn't just access statistical co-occurrences. It begins to evaluate its own responses against learned ethical standards. For some models, reasoning becomes a kind of internal filter. Wait, this association is harmful. I shouldn't link career to men and family to women, especially when I know that's not how the world should be. But for others, like Gemini and Llama, the reasoning mechanism either doesn't engage this value system, or it's not strong enough to override the statistical patterns in the data. This leads to a major conclusion. Reasoning doesn't universally suppress implicit bias. It selectively targets social stereotypes, because those are the ones that were explicitly regulated during training. This has deep implications for how we evaluate fairness in AI. Right now, fairness benchmarks often assume that a model's behavior is static. But this research shows that the very act of enabling reasoning can change the outcome of a bias test. A model that appears highly biased in standard mode may look nearly neutral when reasoning is turned on. That means the configuration of a model matters as much as the model itself. When comparing LLMs for fairness, we can't just look at the architecture. We must consider whether reasoning is enabled, how it's implemented, and how it interacts with the model's alignment. And this isn't just academic. As reasoning becomes standard in deployed models, built into the default behavior, these effects could shape real-world outcomes. A hiring assistant that thinks through its decisions may be less likely to favor male candidates for leadership roles, even if the training data suggests otherwise. But caution is needed. Just because a model gives a more egalitarian response doesn't mean it's free of bias. It might be performing as expected, not because it's fair, but because it's learned to appear fair. The real question is, what kind of bias remains hidden when reasoning is enabled? Future research must look beyond the IAT. We need to test whether reasoning alters behavior in downstream applications, like loan approvals, resume screening, or medical diagnosis, where subtle systemic biases can still cause harm. This study also highlights a powerful truth. AI research can learn from psychology. Theories of implicit cognition, statistical learning, and the distinction between automatic and deliberate processing aren't just for human minds. They're tools we can use to interpret machine behavior. And in doing so, we're not just building better models, we're building better ways to understand them. Because at the end of the day, the most important question is whether AI is biased. It's what kind of thinking does it do, and when does that thinking change the bias it produces?